There's buyers out there that want to buy, and there's sellers that have to sell. So the business is out there. You know, as you know, these are historic times that we are experiencing right now. There's a lot of fear about COVID-19 and the uncertainty in our economy right now. But the business is there. And I respect your choice. I like to tell a story about my mom. She lived with us when our boys were little. It was the last couple of years of her life, and she didn't want to be in one of these homes, so we had her at our house. And I can understand if you're in that type of a situation. If she was living with us now, I'd have the doors locked, and I wouldn't go out, and I wouldn't let anybody in. So I respect those that want to feel safer at home. You definitely are safer at home. But again, for those that want to work, there is business out there. And Danny actually had some good charts that he sent out this past week that actually showed there's been more activity, more closings this year than there have been last year. Also, on that NAR website, they address what they call PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. That's for independent contractors and self-employed individuals. It actually just started last week. We sent out a link. You can learn more about the program and how to apply for it. It's a step-by-step process that's laid out in that CAR website. And for those that want to work, I believe that this is really an unbelievable time. There's still inventory out there. Interest rates are at a historic low. I know you've heard this many times before, but right now, as Jonathan just mentioned, rates should be under 3% for 30-year financing. I've never heard of that. Never heard of that. And the only reason that they're over 3%, because I hear quotes in like 3.25, it's only because there's such a demand from all the refis going on and a reduced workforce from COVID-19 that lenders are charging more than what they should be at that under 3%. And when I talk to our agents, some of our agents have never been busier. I'm going to drop some names here. Elva was in yesterday. She doesn't have enough time to keep up. In fact, she had showings yesterday that she attended. Danny and I, we took on a referral last month for a large home up in the Idlewild area. It had been on the market for over a year, but it had not been marketed. So with with Robert's help, we did a 3D tour. We marketed the property correctly, and we got 2 offers, and it's in escrow at full price. One of our newer agents, new to TRG, Dan, just received his first commission check yesterday. Mike Wren had a couple of listings last month. You may have heard him report on those. He had multiple offers. I think they're both in escrow now. Another agent, Jim Bird, has a closing this week, and he's got a $60,000 commission coming. So, I understand that these are tough times, and I've realized over the decades that agents can still do well in tough times. All it takes is a couple of extra closings, and the individual agent can have a record year. Talk to some of our veteran agents that have been through this before. They've been through the credit crisis, the Great Recession, and the 20% plus interest rates. I see Carol on screen. You talk to Carol, Charlene Glass, Keith, you guys are all with me. Good to see you. They've been through these tough times, and they've survived. And they know that it's going to change. This market will change. Now, unfortunately, it's worse for the broker owners. And since TRG relies on lots of transactions, it's going to be a tough year for Lauren. But it doesn't have to be for you. Low interest rates and high demand are continuing this seller's market. Buyers want to buy, sellers still have to sell. If you don't do the business, somebody else will. Okay, a couple other announcements here. New forms. CAR and ZIP forms have pre-released about a dozen new forms that are supposed to become active in June. Many of them are for rentals, landlord, tenant laws that have changed under that Tenant Protection Act that was passed earlier this year. This is prior to COVID-19. As if you recall, I know it seems like a long time ago, but the Tenant Protection Act limits rent increases and puts restrictions on no-fault evictions. You look fine, Jack. It's okay. You can leave the hat off. It's okay. Again, we're open 9 to noon every day. Call us if it's going to be in the afternoon. Thursday, lunch and learns. Hey, we got a good lineup here. As we mentioned, tomorrow we're going to have Jonathan talk about financing and how COVID-19 has impacted his industry. Next week, I'm real interested in hearing from our economists. We've got Ray Kay coming on. I enjoy his talk every year when he speaks to us. So we've got him on a Zoom here in about a week, and he's going to give us predictions on where this market is headed. You remember that you have to use your passwords and links to join our Zoom meetings for our Thursday haves and wants. I'm sorry, our Thursdays lunch and learns. Okay, so I'm going to take a break here, and I'm going to let Danny head up our haves and wants while I talk to Stephen Spierer and get him on. Danny, it's all yours. If you guys raise your hand, we can call you. If you're just on the phone or you don't have video, you're welcome to text us. If you have questions or you have comments, the same applies during Spier's talk here. Again, raise your hand. We'll see you or text us. Go ahead. You want to take.
Go ahead, Audrey, you're first. All right, if not, we'll move to Carol. Go ahead, Carol.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy Mother's Day to all. I'm just stepping up because I'm finding out that my listing that was over in La Rotonda, Ocean Terrace, is probably coming back on the market. Pretty soon. We're probably looking at somewhere once again in the low 8s. We were in escrow. The buyer and seller could not agree at the very last minute, and then the buyer decided to say, I'll buy it at $30,000 less. So it was a little bit of a challenge at the end. We've had it off the market for about a month. We're looking at putting it back on the market pretty soon. This time I get the opportunity of sharing listing with an agent from Sotheby's. And we shall see how this works out. So the ocean view is awesome. It's quiet. It's meditative going there. And if you go back to my expired listing, you can see all the photos. So if you have any questions, I'm Carol Gillis at 310-864-9738. Have a great day.
Anybody else that's on a call, maybe not on screen, that wants to have a want? Go ahead. Really? There's no haves and wants out there? Nobody has buyers?
Yeah, I got one. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
Oh, yeah, I got a listing on Howard. It was in escrow. We had about 6 offers on it, and it fell out at the last minute. It's listed for $1.1 million. The appraisal came in at $1.165. It's a great home. It's vacant, so it's easy to show. And I just asked that you use all the protocol to keep it clean. Bring an offer. 310-503-7352 is my phone number.
All right, and go ahead, Becky.
So I still have a family looking in a really specific area, that area 123 in Torrance, which is right across from Harbor UCLA. And there's really slim pickings right now. But if you know of anybody or if you've been farming that area, they're super qualified. And they want a 3-bedroom 2-bath if possible. Air conditioning would be a plus, but it's not a deal killer. But that's such a small niche, and they have an elderly family member. Well, they're living with their parents right now, so they want to stay close. So area 1, 2, 3, and just right across, not this way or that way or this way, but right there. I'd appreciate any leads or info.
All right, anybody else that has some haves and wants? Don't see anybody else on here. So I wanted to pitch the South Bay Association. So they do a caravan every Friday via Zoom, just like this. You can sign up through their form. You'll have to have some sort of computer to present that tour, whether it's a slideshow or a video, or you can always email the link to Nikki at the South Bay Association as she runs that. And it's a great way for you guys to preview properties throughout the South Bay. That way, if you're not able to go in person, you at least kind of know what's on the market, and you can get a better feel of what's just on the MLS, and a chance to touch bases with that agent and to talk with them. So if there's no more haves and wants, we'll turn it back over to Dirk so he can introduce Stephen Spierer.
Hi, welcome. I'm sure most of you know Stephen Spierer. He's been a practicing real estate attorney here in the South Bay for over 40 years. He's been our company attorney for over 20 years. And in my humble opinion, he's the best real estate attorney out there. In addition, each year, Mr. Spierer hosts regular podcasts on Talk Radio 1. Here's Stephen Spierer. You're on, Steve.
Good morning, ladies, and thank you so much for joining us here today. What I'd like you to do is think of this as a 1-hour consultation, or I'm told 30-minute consultation with a real estate attorney someone else is paying. So what you should do if you have a question is follow the format. It's raise your hand, or we could open chat feature if Danny wants to do that. Take questions that way. In fact, Danny, is that all right with you? Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to chat feature. Down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, what you should do is click chat, and then you can type in a question, type in any question you want, and then I will see them and I will answer them if we have time. And this is like popcorn, ladies and gentlemen. It starts out very slowly, and by the time my time runs out, there'll probably be a bunch of unanswered questions because we do have a large number of people participating in this. So get your questions in early. Anything to do with real estate brokerage, the coronavirus and your processes, or anything else that you're trying to do and you're trying to figure out. In the meantime, I was given a couple of questions. When is this going to end? Now, this is the question facing not just realtors, it's facing the country, facing the world. When is this going to end? And the answer is it's going to be a process. And the question of when does it end suggests that when it's over, it's like a movie ending where you just go out of the theater and resume your normal life. That's not what we're going to have here. There are going to be a number of changes, some of which are going to change our lives forever, and others are going to be temporary. They might last a year or so. After September 11th, people said the world will never be the same, and in fact, it's not. It's different in a lot of ways. There are changes from September 11th, some 19 years ago, that are still with us today, and there are others that were temporary and have fallen off. It's going to be the same thing with COVID-19. Going to be the very same thing. So for right now, it's going to be masks and it's going to be social distancing and so forth when the stays are lifted. And you'll want to go back cautiously so you don't infect anyone else and so that you don't get infected. And you're going to want to go back, and people are going to go back cautiously because just because the stay is lifted doesn't mean everybody's going to come out and look at an open house. So what you're going to need to do it, and the real estate group will give you guidance as you go. The California Association of Realtors will give you guidance as you go. Follow those guides. I'm happy to answer specific questions about it. One of the things I'm getting a lot of questions about are the forms that have been issued by the California Association of Realtors. And one of the things that's clear to me is that the PEAD forms, those are the PEAD and the PLR, leases and rentals, and these are property advisories and disclosures. And I strongly recommend using those because they're more disclosures. Those of you who are familiar with my work and my opinions, and for that matter, for those of you who have consultation accounts, call with quick questions and speak with us, know that disclosure is the center of all of the limitation of liability, and it is the key to you staying out of lawsuits. And so the PEAD, the CAR form PEAD and the CAR form PEAD-LR for leases and rentals, this should be used every time, should be signed by all buyers and all sellers, or in the case of the LR, by all tenants. I would also use the CAR form CVA, the coronavirus addendum, for delays, and you can use that. Excuse me, don't worry about that cough, I'm okay. If you have a tenant who isn't paying rent, there are CAR forms for that. I wouldn't use those. People are frightened right now, and so when you produce this form to your tenant and you say, here, I want you to sign this, promising all these things, they are not going to be made to feel well about that. And when, after this is all over, people look around to say who was helpful and who was not, you want to be in the group where they say, yeah, you're very, very helpful. You don't want to be in the group where they say, yeah, that landlord was mean to me. So what we're looking at for landlord advice, if you're doing any property management, on purpose or accidentally, because a lot of realtors accidentally property manage without getting paid, but they have all the liability and none of the insurance. But if you're doing property management, if you're interfacing with any tenants who cannot pay the rent, we suggest that you don't communicate by text, don't communicate by email, communicate directly with the tenants, either in person with 6-foot distancing and masks, or by telephone, but have a direct communication. And you'd say, gee, I noticed you didn't pay the May 1st rent. How are you? How are you thriving? Are you okay? Do you still have a job? Do you have income? Do you have savings? Are you okay? Are your kids okay? Are your parents okay? And when you finished with that, then you can say, without the rent being paid, we understand if you're not able to pay the rent, but if you're able to pay the rent, you should pay the rent, because ultimately you're going to have to pay the rent, and you don't want to dig a hole for yourself that you have to dig out of later. And so it would be better if you paid the rent. If you can't pay all the rent, how about half the rent? What you don't do is you don't forgive rent. And what you do when you're finished with that conversation is you go back to your desk and you send an email confirming the conversation. The message has been, we're in this together. We're going to get through this together. We're not evicting anyone right now. If you can't pay the rent, we understand. I'll check with you in 2 weeks. That's the message. I'll check with you again in 2 weeks. Be sure to call me back, because as long as we're communicating, we can work together. Look, you wanted to be our tenant. We wanted you to be our tenant. We assume that hasn't changed. You're our customer. And so we want you to be happy and comfortable. Of course, you'll have to pay the rent, but if you can't pay it right now, we understand. Nothing is gained by getting tough with tenants and saying to them, you have to pay the rent. If you have questions about that or anything else, go down to the bottom of the screen on Zoom and click chat, and go ahead and type your questions in there. I will see them and I will answer those as we go. Let me go back and get another one of the earlier questions. Should we be using the new zip forms for COVID-19 forms? I think I just answered that. Can landlords enforce the end of a lease now? For example, a 1-year lease ended May 1st, and the landlord gave a 60-day notice, 2 months prior to expiration, but the tenants don't want to move. Well, the answer is there are no courts to help you evict someone if you want to evict someone. It started out under Governor Newsom's rule that you could not evict for non-payment of rent. Then the next rule that came out is you cannot evict for anything except life safety issues. And non-payment of rent is not a life safety issue. A life safety issue would be where the tenant is doing something that's creating danger or risk or potential injury, then you can evict some of that, but that's not this. So the second problem is there are no courtrooms. The only judges that are doing anything right now are emergency judges who are acting for emergencies, temporary restraining orders, temporary protective orders, injunctions. They're not handling trials, not even handling criminal trials. And civil trials take a backseat to criminal trials because you might remember that the Constitution of the United States guarantees a right to a speedy trial, so criminal trials get precedence. And what that means is this: the courts are already backed up. It was already hard to get trial dates. There were already delays. They already took longer than they should. Now, with a backlog of weeks and weeks, maybe months, once the courts are finally back in operation, A, they'll be moving more slowly because of social distancing. B, they're going to have a huge backlog of cases, which is made worse by the fact there are so many people not paying rent, and is made worse by the fact that the caseload that's normally there will still be there. So for right now, your best bet as a landlord is to make peace with the tenant, be a good landlord, do the human thing right first. Oh, and one more thing on landlord-tenant. The government evictions, and I can't tell you how many people have said to me, gee, there are no evictions, and I've heard I don't have to pay rent. And I say, no one said you didn't have to pay rent. What was said is there are no evictions. And about half the people say, oh, I get it. And the other half people say, what's the difference? That sounds like the same thing to me. And so you have to explain, no, it's not free rent. It's just, we can't evict you right now, but all the rent is still owed. A question that just popped up on the chat, and you can use the chat, just click the chat at the bottom and type in your question, and we've got one. If the tenant agrees to move upon termination of lease, can the property management terminate the lease by mutual consent? Sure, anybody who agrees to move out can move out. And if the landlord and the tenant can make an agreement that the tenant is going to leave, then there's no problem with that. Be careful what you wish for, because it's going to be hard to rent. You might just end up with a vacant apartment instead of an apartment where maybe somebody will pay you rent. Next question that came in on the chat is, can you explain the proposed AB 828 and how that affects single family rental properties? Well, first of all, we don't know if it's going to pass. Second of all, it's still in negotiation. And so what I have found is that by the time these bills work their way through the legislature, so much has happened to them that guessing as to what they're going to say doesn't end up actually helping. And so as a consequence, I don't have any huge comment on that. I could speculate, but there's going to be nothing that you can rely on with respect to that. Next question on the chat. Are there legal requirements to pay back rent? I heard the tenants may get 1 year. So initially it said that once the stay is lifted, that there will be still 9 months when you can't evict them. And then I heard then another order was it's going to be a year, and another one was it's going to be 6 months. I can't remember which order they came in, but the point is this was changing every hour. Now it's changing about every day, and it's going to continue to change every day. So once the courts are reactivated, they're going to learn things that they didn't know. They're going to learn what their caseload can be. They're going to have to figure out how to have people travel into the courthouse. Are they going to require temperatures? They're going to require masks. They're going to say that you can only have one person in an elevator or 3 people in an elevator. Who's going to be able to, all of the things are going to unfold and dictate a lot of what the governor says about the courts. And then you have what the presiding judge says about the courts. And the supervising judge of the courts, the Supreme Courts in Southern California, may very well make different rules, tighter rules than the governor. So when we're talking about how long is it going to be, nobody knows is the answer you should bear in mind. You should bear that in mind and know it's a negotiation between you and the tenant, and you won't be able to rely on the courts for quite some time, because even when they reopen, they're going to be feeling their way to figure out how to do this. AB 828, temporary moratorium on foreclosures and unlawful detainers, is what it is. If you didn't know, yes. And again, nobody knows what it's finally going to say. And what it says right now doesn't matter, because it's going to be negotiated. In AB means assembly bill, and it's going to go through the assembly. It's going to go through the state senate. It's going to be signed or not signed by the governor. And we don't know what it's going to say. Once we know what it says, we still won't know what it means, because it's going to be a question of enforcement. So even if, for example, the bill comes through and it becomes law, and it says that there's going to be 9 months before you can evict anyone, or 9 months before you can commence a foreclosure, it's entirely possible that the supervising judge of the Los Angeles County Courts or the Orange County Courts will make a different rule and say, no, it's going to be longer. Or, yes, no problem, you can do it, but we're only going to allow 1 trial per day instead of the usual 20, or 5 trials per day instead of the usual 20. So getting a handle on how long it's going to be before a landlord can evict, or before a lender can actually foreclose, the only correct answer is we don't know right now. And anyone who tells you, oh yes, it says this, or we know this, or it's this, is guessing. And it serves no purpose to guess. And anyone who is guessing, the most important thing to know about it is it serves no purpose to listen, because nobody knows. This is going to unfold one step at a time. Temporary, again on AB 828, Danny says, temporary moratorium on foreclosures and lawful detainer action. Okay, with forms, they allow extension of escrows and contingencies. How do you see the and deposits being released? Okay. We're hearing a lot of creative arguments made by lawyers who want to force deals to close, and lawyers on the other side who want to make deals fail, who want to get people out of this. And we've seen some tremendously creative legal theories that some of which make sense and others of which make no sense. There is a civil code section. California, you can Google this and read it yourself. It's very Civil Code section 1511. If you Google California Civil Code section 1511, it says the want of performance of an obligation, what it basically says is you can get out of a contract when it is prevented or delayed by an irresistible superhuman cause, or by the act of public enemy of the state or United States, unless the parties have expressly agreed to the contrary. So what we're seeing is some people who don't want to buy, but they've removed all their contingencies and they don't want to lose their deposit. Their lawyer is saying that Civil Code section 1511 says that if the close of escrow is delayed or prevented by an irresistible superhuman cause, and they say, well, certainly this is superhuman and certainly it's irresistible. This is a virus and you can't resist it and it's superhuman. This statute was not made. Statute was made for when the purpose of any contract has been utterly demolished. It's been frustrated. So, for example, if you're going to buy the house and the house burns to the ground, that's where Section 1511 is, because an irresistible superhuman cause made it so there's nothing to sell anymore. Or where an earthquake happens and the earth opens up and swallows the house and the lot is gone, that's irresistible superhuman cause. But the virus didn't swallow the house. It didn't burn the house to the ground. The house is still there. The house is still occupiable. So this clause doesn't pertain, and the reason is because the irresistible superhuman cause is a virus. That's not the cause of the contract failing. The contract is being prevented or delayed by government action in shutting down the government, or by party action. Let's say the lender doesn't make a loan, or the seller isn't going to allow people to come in and look at the property, or the buyer doesn't have the funds, or whatever it would be. That isn't superhuman, that's human. And it's not irresistible. It's maybe not your choice, but it's a choice by the government. And so as a consequence, that clause is not going to do that. Question, can we recommend you as an attorney for those landlords who may need? Are you taking new clients? Yes. I am from home. Here I am in my television studio. And so we're doing the consultations by telephone. All of the 14 lawyers in our office are doing that. And if you would like an appointment, send an email to me. I'll say my email address in a moment. And what I'll do is route it to our calendar man who will coordinate quote fees, set an appointment, and I'll be more than glad to meet with your clients. You, as realtors, are always welcome to join on any consultation where your clients or you think it's a good idea. Always happy to have you as a part of that. My email address, steve@practicallawyer.com. steve@practicallawyer.com. We're representing landlords, tenants, employers, employees, people having anything to do with real estate or business, everything from car washes to barbers to zipper manufacturers to people in transportation and the like. Question, I am assuming you think clients should be flexible to extend escrows. What's your opinion? Boy, I sure do, because what you have in any transaction in the normal world, you have a seller who wants to sell and a buyer who wants to buy. And so both people want the transaction. It's not different than going to McDonald's, where McDonald's wants to sell you a hamburger and you want to buy a hamburger. This is the free enterprise system. And so once you have who wants to buy and a seller who wants to sell, being flexible and using the appropriate form, the CVA, the coronavirus addendum, to allow for extensions, I think that's a great idea, because the object of the seller is to get a closed escrow. That's the object of the buyer. And of course, it's your objective as realtors to serve your clients' needs and get a closed escrow. And so absolutely, you want to cooperate. You don't, if there's a theme through all of the advice we're giving now, it's that you don't want to be a tough guy. This is not the time to turn to people and be harsh, because people are already frightened. They're already on edge. Some of them are having financial troubles. Other people, the calls, suicide lines nationwide are up over 1,000%. We are seeing domestic violence. We're seeing increased drug abuse, alcoholism. We're seeing all sorts of problems that are happening separate from the coronavirus as a result of the lockdown, and we need to bear those in mind as well. Bear that in mind when you're dealing with your sellers, your buyers, for that matter, your families and friends, to be patient. This isn't the time to be a tough guy. So yes, I would be flexible on extending escrows. If you have questions, put them up on the chat line, and I will go back to some of the previous questions I had. When do you, the courts don't think I've answered that. When do you expect evictions to be allowed for the non-payment of rent? I think I've hit that one. Are landlords required to offer back rent or payment plans? No, not yet. There is one of the proposals I've heard is that for cases that are going through evictions, can the court force the landlord to forgive 20% of the rent, and can the court force the landlord to lower the rent by 20%? I've heard both of these floated. To my knowledge, they haven't passed. If they do pass, I think there's a tremendous amount of litigation over whether those are constitutional takings by the government of private property without just compensation, which is prohibited under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. So it's not clear whether that's going to be there, whether that's going to be enforceable or not. So again, for right now, we don't know. Question for Stephen: if a landlord would like to offer a tenant cash for keys, how would you handle it to make sure they actually leave? So as a practical matter, what we do is we say, as a practical matter, what we do is we say that what you would do is make the deal first, and then you would give most of the cash when they move out. So you would say, if you are willing to move out, and again, you have to look, if you're in City of Los Angeles rent control, some of that is, there are requirements for this, minimum payments to have tenants move, and cash for keys. You can't just have people move out, and those rules have not been suspended. So be aware of those. Also, under the state rent control rules, there are questions about that. But separate from that, what you would do is you would strike a deal with the tenant, and you'd say, if you will move out by May 15th and surrender the keys to me, then I will pay you X number of dollars. Right now, I'll pay you 20% of X, and when you move out, I'll give you 80%. Or I'll give you 25% now, and I'll give you 75% when you move out. That would be about the ratio I'd be looking at. The highest I would go is I'll give you a third now, and I'll give you the other 2/3 when you move out. Another alternative for that is you say to them, if you're moving somewhere else, I will give 100% of that money to the landlord of your new property, security deposit, and I will do that on the day you move. You can do that, or you could give the landlord some portion of it early and money on the day you move out. And move out, you are there, you inspect the premises, you see that they're vacant, you socially distance while you're doing it, you wear a mask while you're doing it, and what you do is you give them that money on that day once you see that the premises are in good condition. Then let me see if okay, great. So click at the bottom of the screen, click chat, and you will be able to ask questions. I've been told I should run until 10 o'clock, and Danny or Durf, if there are more questions, do you want me to continue, or shall we cut it off in 4 minutes? Give me a feeling.
It's fine, cutting it off in 4 is all right.
Great. So let me just close in the last few minutes by telling you a couple of thoughts I've got. What you should be doing right now as realtors right now are going to be divided into two groups. There are the realtors who are going to just wait until this ends so that they can go back to doing business as usual. Those realtors are not going to do very well. The other group of realtors are making proactive moves right now. They're improving their websites. They're looking at their advertising materials. They're looking at the way they do business. They're reading, studying, learning what they can do to improve their practice. And those realtors are positioning themselves so that whatever comes of this, when it comes out, happens, however it unfolds, you'll be ready to take advantage of the situation and become productive and successful and profitable in the post-COVID world. This situation requires that we all be nimble and agile and keep watching for change. One of the most upsetting things people are doing to themselves, for those who are in this situation, is they're trying to find the answer. What is the concrete answer? How is it going to be? What day will it happen? And what are the rules going to be? Those answers are unavailable at this time. And if you can live with the fact that you're maintaining your balance while the ground underneath you, if you can get used to that, you'll actually do very well. And out of this with your flying high, you'll do well, you'll thrive, you'll prosper. This is something similar for anyone who's been on board a large vessel to getting at sea, is get sea legs. You get used to the boat or ship moving under you. You get used to the motion and it doesn't bother you. You just roll with it. And if you do that here, if you get used to the idea that this is going to be a continuously evolving situation with new news every day for a long time, then you'll be able to cope with it very well, because really, we are all in this together and we will get through this together. And ultimately, people will figure out the modus vivendi, the method of living, to be able to move forward and put all of this back together. I would also say on a personal level that you want to be sure with proper social distancing to get plenty of sunlight and fresh air. It's a great disinfectant. The things that this has done that really isn't good virus defense is to stay inside all the time. So go outside, and if you have a place to go where you can walk or ride a bike safely, then do that. If it's just standing out on the porch, do that. I would also say call 5 friends a day. We all have people in our lives who we think, you know, I'd really love to reach out to that person, but I'm just so busy. Right now would be a great time to pick 5 people a day who you've been meaning to get a hold of and get a hold of them. You'll find those phone calls are very welcome because coincidentally, they're sitting around as well. So they're available, you're available, don't miss the opportunity. I want to thank you all for being with me today on this. You all practice safe sales, and thanks very much for joining us.
Steve, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, this concludes our Zoom meeting. I'm not going to attempt to sing happy birthday for our May birthdays, but I do want to recognize Lauren. She had her birthday yesterday. I don't know who else has a May birthday, so happy birthday, Lauren. All right, so hey, it was a great meeting. Thank you very much. Great program, and we'll see you tomorrow for our Lunch and Learn. Make it a great day. Thank you, guys.